now on Blooming in Brisbane, Claire Bickle with Growing Bulbs.
Hi, today I'm going to talk to you about growing bulbs in Brisbane. Now there's a lot of controversy surrounding the idea of bulbs, and a lot of people think of them as more cool climate sort of plants. But there are a great range of bulbs that will do really well in Brisbane to plant now in autumn. Now there's two types of bulbs I kind of have in my mind when I start thinking about growing bulbs, and that's ones that will grow quite happily in the garden and even naturalise and actually spread out and live in your garden for years. And then there's the larger bulb types, which tend to be more of a one-off, so you might be able to plant them in the garden or preferably in pots. They'll flower for you, but then that's probably about all you're going to get from those particular varieties. Now those particular varieties, the ones that tend to be more of a one-off, I tend to find some of your larger bulbs like tulips, hyacinths and daffodils. They really do like a cold climate, and if you pop them in a paper bag in the crisper drawer for about 4 to 6 weeks before you plant, you will then find that gives them the required sort of chilling to sort of snap them down into sort of wanting to shoot away and then produce flowers. But you'll tend to find that I find these better off growing in pots. The other ones that I really like and adore are some of the old-fashioned bulbs, and some of you might know them quite well. So freesias are probably one of the more popular ones, and there's a whole range of freesias these days. Refractor alba and refractor mixed are ones I like. They tend to be fairly perfumed, smaller flowers, but you'll see them in a lot of old-fashioned Brisbane gardens, naturalised throughout the lawn and even growing under trees. So these can go in pots or in the garden quite nicely. Ranunculus, once again, they'll do quite well in pots or in the ground, but you'll probably only get one season from your ranunculus, but they are very pretty and no different to if you were growing petunias or marigolds or whatever the case may be. Anemones are another one, coming in pinks and blues, purples and whites. They're also very pretty similar to ranunculus, but you'll probably only get one go out of those as well. Sparaxis is another favourite. My great aunt used to have these growing extremely successfully up in Toowoomba, and they naturalised up there where it's just that little bit cooler. In Brisbane you might get a few seasons out of them in the garden, but otherwise maybe not as often as you'd like the freesias. Babianas, purples and pinks, and these tend to come up year after year as well. So they're a lovely little upright bulb, the plant that you can have in the middle of, say, a flowering garden bed. Tritelias are lovely as well. They're more of an edging plant, and we had those growing at my grandmother's as a child right in the middle of Brisbane, and they came up year after year. So very low growing, beautiful white and blue and mauve star-like flowers. Last on my list here of ones that I find that do well in the garden as well as in pots, and you might get a couple of years out of, are ixias, and they're also pretty. Very upright growing habit, a bit like the babianas as well. All of them make really lovely cut flowers. I find the smaller bulbs, I don't tend to bother popping those in a paper bag in the crisper drawer. It's mainly some of the larger bulbs. And the ones that I find do well in both situations are the jonquils. Now these do well in pots as well in the garden. I've got quite a few gardening friends and horticultural colleagues that have their jonquils planted in their gardens in Brisbane. They've planted them quite deeply in the ground in the garden, and they find that they come up each year. But in a pot situation, things like your jonquils and your hyacinths and even your daffodils, they really prefer, and it's kind of against what we tend to say with other flowering plants, they actually prefer to be really, really tightly closed, planted in with each other. So you can actually have them quite snug in their pots. You can fit them all in there together, and then basically just fill up around those and just have the very tops or the necks of those bulbs close to the surface, if not even poking through a little bit. This is, of course, after they've been in your crisper drawer for about 4 to 6 weeks to get that chilling down before you plant them out. And I prefer to do it once we're well and truly into autumn, so we don't have any more of those nasty little hot spells which can cause your bulbs to rot, especially if we've got a little bit of autumn rain around. So that's a really simple way just to pot up some jonquils. Another one that does really well in pots, I don't have a picture of it here today, are snowflakes, not to be confused with snowdrops. Snowdrops are very, very cold climate. Snowflakes I've had naturalising in my garden at home for about 10 years. Beautiful little white bell-shaped flowers with the green dot on them. They're absolutely stunning. So as you can see, there's a whole range of bulbs that will still flower really well in Brisbane. Liquid fertilise them on a every 2 to 3 weeks with something high in potassium. Most of them prefer really a sunny position with good drainage, so not heavy clay soils, and you can have a beautiful display of bulbs in Brisbane but like I said, some of them will last for years, some may not. I think there's also a whole range of bulbs which we'll talk about soon where you can grow those and they'll flower into the summer as well. So the choices for bulbs in Brisbane is endless.
Hi, I wanted to share with you another plant from my garden. It's the Quisqualis, or the Rangoon Creeper. This particular form is a double flowering variety, and of course the perfume is just unbelievable. Towards the end of the day, that's when it starts to become emitted. But it's a strong, tough plant that is pretty much unperturbed by any form of insect or disease. It's a really strong plant. You know, the old Rangoon Creeper used to be around in everyone's gardens, and I think it needs time to come back into everyone's gardens again. So try and discover it if you can. Quisqualis is the name of it. You may have trouble finding the double form, but certainly you may find it easier to find the old single form. It grows just as strong and vigorously like this.
Up next, Claire takes a visit to Mount Cosby.